Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation 1 is one of my favourite games of all time. It was released in 1997, so it's 23 years later, and it's finally been remade after being teased at the PlayStation 3 reveal, where they showed what Midgard would look like with modern graphics. And then finally, when it was actually formally announced that it was being remade back at E3 2015. Over the course from 2015 up until release, I've been equal parts filled with excitement and dread. I hold the game in such high esteem and high regard that I was really worried how they were going to do it, especially when the news came out that Final Fantasy VII Remake is only the first portion of the game. It runs from the events from the start of the game up until the end of the Midgard section, which on a normal playthrough of Final Fantasy VII PlayStation 1 would take a handful of hours, has now been stretched over a 37-hour experience, or that's what it was in my case. Now the questions I'm going to be trying to answer in this are, did the game succeed? What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? And then I'm going to move on to spoilers. The spoiler territory is going to be where my main gripes are with the game. Now I will make it very, very clear when we're moving into spoiler territory, so that if you haven't played the game yet, you can stop the video, go and play it and enjoy it, and come back afterwards. The content isn't going anywhere. Alright, let's get into it. Over the course of my time playing this game, I was filled with absolute wonder and then absolute horror. Fortunately, those are not in equal parts. The wonder comes from the OST, which is absolutely fantastic. It is borderline broken how good it actually is. Granted, I'm filled with nostalgia, so hearing the OST kick back in and hearing all the remastered tracks with full orchestras behind them just really got me from the moment the game opened all the way through until the end. It's something really special. I think even if you haven't played the original and so the music's fresh to you, you would have heard this music before. It is so iconic. And to hear it be done as well as it is a triumph in of itself. Now, having the game spread over 37 hours with such a small section of the greater Final Fantasy VII story has meant a couple of things. Every single character that you meet and interact with is really fleshed out and is given a lot of personality, is given time to grow over the course of the story. This is a huge positive to the game. In the original, I didn't give a shit about any of the members of Avalanche outside of Barrett and Tifa, whereas in this, Biggs, Jesse, Wedge, they all get their chance to shine and they just become key members of your party that you really look forward to having some time with. Now this game, in my opinion, is carried by two things. It's carried by characters and it's carried by combat. Now in terms of the characters first, as I mentioned, you get to meet all the members that you would do in the PlayStation 1 original, meeting at the same points that you would do originally. All the characters are handled with such care and such finesse. The voice acting is absolutely stellar, and the facial animations, although they can be a little bit weird, generally for the most part are great. On the first couple of hours, I wasn't too sure about Barrett. I wasn't too sure how I thought about him. His voice acting is a little bit dodgy, but he really warmed on me over the course of the game, to the point where I really missed him when he wasn't in my party. All the major plot points for Final Fantasy VII are covered in this. Every single enemy that you fight is taken from the original game, alongside some new ones. The key moments that had to happen in the story do happen. However, with the extra time, what they've managed to do is they've managed to add in some side quests, and they've managed to add in some really good character development, which was sorely lacking from the original for this section. Now, do they hit or not is a difficult question, because the quests aren't particularly good. None of the quests really have any merit at all, but I still did them. I still had fun doing them. They're generic and they're normally simply fetch quests or go and kill this thing. There's nothing there that's going to rival The Witcher 3 in terms of its side quest content or its ability to be able to create separate plot lines that you care about just as much as the main one. But they are a nice distraction. And it's a good way just to be able to have extra combat, which is where this game really shines. Now, in terms of the combat, the original Final Fantasy VII's combat was turn-based, with an active time battle feature, which meant that it wasn't truly turn-based combat, like Dragon Quest, whereby you can get onto your turn and not do anything, and you'll be fine, you won't be attacked until your turn is done. In the original Final Fantasy VII, it was a case that each character in your party had an active time battle meter, which would fill up and then enable you to select an action to do, be that attack, magic, summons, limit breaks, whatever the case is. And their time that would take to fill would also be individual based on that character and what they had equipped and what their stats were, and that would also count the same for the enemies. Now in this game they've changed that and they've made it into just active battle, in as much as it's just a normal action game for the combat, but you still have an active time battle meter which fills up and then enables you to do extra commands. weapons. So your normal attacks for all of your characters, you can do them at any point, alongside blocking and dodging. When this active time battle bar fills, you can then gain access to your magic, and you can gain access to individual techniques which each character has, and they have quite a big smorgasbord full of abilities. For example, with Cloud, you gain access to Braver, and Braver is normally a limit break in the original Final Fantasy VII, but for this it's just a weapon art. The combat is just absolutely fantastic. It's really, really good how they've managed to be able to add so much depth to it while making it as fluid as it is. Now, I do have some gripes with the combat, in as much as your limit gauge doesn't carry over between fights like it does in the original. So now it's just a case of when you get limit, you might as well just use it as soon as you can, rather than in the original where you earn limit from taking damage and from dealing damage, and then you want to use that to fight a powerful enemy, go into the battle with those equipped and with those ready to use. Whereas in this, that's not the case. So it kind of takes that element of planning and that element of wanting to save your resources out of it a little bit, which is a real shame to me. And it's the same with your active time battle meter, your ATB meter. It all resets when you come out of a battle, which to me is a real shame, because it just means that you'll get through certain sections of the game where you've got a corridor basically filled with enemies who are all 10-15 steps away from each other, and you end up doing your actions, killing those enemies, and then going back in and then having to just do the same things over and over again, rather than it just being a case of you thinking, right, well, this enemy's got low HP, I'll just finish him with attacks, and then be able to go in with my ATB gauge full, and then deal magic right at the start of the next encounter. It takes that choice out of it, and that to me is a weakness of the combat. But you can find certain materia which will slot into your weapons and then kind of limit that, negate that to a certain extent, which does help quite a lot. Now, in terms of the materia system is basically carried over directly from Final Fantasy VII, the original, and I'm so happy with that in terms of their magic and upgrades and how that affects your stats. I love it in Final Fantasy VII, the original, and they've just brought that over to this. And the weapons that you find, just like in the original, change how many materia slots you have. They also then create an extra layer on this, and you can upgrade those weapons themselves to be able to tailor combat to how you want to play it. So for example, in my party, Cloud for me was my magic user, so I had him full with offensive magic. When it came to choosing a weapon and choosing a build for that, I was building stuff that were building his magic attack power and would boost his MP itself. Whereas Barrett was more my tank character, so he was full of healing magic. His main goal was to stand back and just heal the rest of the squad. And Tifa then was full on going in to mess characters up. And I basically just maximized his speed and his physical attack power, but with low defense, so that all three of them could work in combination with each other. You've got a lot of variety with the weapons that you find over the course of the game and the materia that you're presented with to be able to tailor combat to however you'd like it. There is one flaw that I think will be worked on for the eventual part 2, and that is air combat. Fighting air enemies is a pain in the arse. Outside of Barrett and Iris, you can't wail on them like you can with any other enemy. It just causes fights to just go on longer than they need to be for such a fodder enemy. I've got a feeling that in part 2 they're going to do something with that and tweak that. I kind of want to talk about summons and my thoughts on them and how I feel they play. Much like with the combat in general, when I mentioned about how the ATB bar doesn't carry over and all the limit breaks, and that kind of hampers the combat. Summons, I feel, are handled in the same way. In the original, summons you could slot into materia and they would be a big MP use for you to use them, and they would also negatively affect your stats for having them. But you could use them as often as you wanted, as long as you had the MP to support it. In this, summons only seem to kick in big fights, and it's only when you're taking a bit of a beating. To me, it just diminishes the summons. I think anytime the choice for you using anything or not is removed from you, and it just becomes onto an arbitrary meter that just decides to fill up and then activate, is a negative. Even though I like the way that summons are used in terms of when you actually do use them in combat, and how you can then swap your ATB gauges for unique attacks that the summons can do, I'd like the option to be able to call someone in whenever I wanted to, even if it was then a massive MP drain, or it was the case that at that point then I need to fill up a separate gauge which then had its own requirement. I don't like it that it just kicks in the middle of like a big battle. Why wouldn't you just bring it out whenever you wanted to as a player? Outside those small nitpicks, combat is absolutely superb. The setting of Midgar has been greatly expanded, and it really feels like a living, breathing city compared to the original. You still go to the same sections. With the extra time, you get to spend more time on top of the plate of Midgar. You get to see how the upper class live compared to the lower class slums. The difference in this, to make Midgar feel like a living, breathing world, is incredible. It's amazing what they've done to be able to really show the difference in the lives that the lower class lead compared to the top. Through the events that happen over the course of the game, how that affects affect the population of Midgar from what the NPCs are saying or what's happening to them is something that you definitely didn't experience in Final Fantasy VII Original. You didn't see how what you were doing was impacting the general lives of the people. You really feel that in this. You really feel a sense of weight for what you're doing. Overall, my thoughts for the spoiler-free section of this review. The game has an incredible music soundtrack. The characters in combat are both excellent, albeit the combat does have flaws. But I am fully confident that the nitpicks that I've had throughout my course of the game are going to be rectified with a sequel. There's nothing major in there that's game breaking. There's nothing in there that would take away from my overall joy that I had experiencing this game. But I do have some major critiques, and they are going to be in the spoiler section. So I'm going to move it over to spoilers now. You've been warned. My major critique with this game stems around the Whispers of Fate, how they're implemented, and the ending that comes alongside that. So I'm going to go into this in a little bit of depth here. So the Whispers of Fate are shown to be trying to put the timeline on the same course as in the original Final Fantasy VII. And it turns out that Sephiroth's whole goal is that he wants to alter the timeline, so then eventually he can succeed. And the only character that seems privy to this knowledge is Aerith. So it brings to the conclusion that potentially Aerith and Sephiroth are from different timelines, and they know the events that are due to happen. And that's cool. I really like that. I'm a big fan of remakes that do this kind of thing, like with Star Trek, when that was remade and you had old Spock who was aware of the events and how things had changed. And I really, really like that because it's kind of meta for the audience. And so I had no problem with that at all. And it also explained why Sephiroth was showing up so often to taunt Cloud throughout the course of the game. And I like that. However, what I don't like is how they implemented it. The Whispers themselves suck. I hate them. Some part of my Neanderthal brain has a proper hatred for the Whispers. Throughout the course of the game, I thought maybe they're ancients and they're on our side. But then certain points, then they just attack people and they do stuff. And I couldn't quite figure out why this was happening. When Red 13 just gets this random epiphany moment, just says, oh, these are Whispers of Fate. They're supposed to be there to set a timeline right. I couldn't get on with that at all. There's got to have been a better solution than that. It's such a random thing for them just to be appearing to put the timeline right. Like, why? Why even bother? Why not just have things just go different from the original and just have it just be different? Why couldn't they just do that instead of having this whole anime Kingdom Hearts ass fight at the end with Fate itself? I just do not like that at all. It didn't help the fight was boring as shit as well. And that it was spectacle, but it wasn't good spectacle. It wasn't like the early portions of the game, which had a lot of spectacle and a lot of anime, kind of Advent Children style stuff thrown into it, and I was all for that. But if you're going to do something like this, there's got to be a more ingenious way than have these random plot ghosts that come up and stop things from happening. As I said, I'm torn. I like what this opens up, although I find myself in a similar way to how I opened this video and I explained about equal parts dread and excitement. I feel that going forward, because if Aerith knows what's going to happen, why wouldn't she just stop Cloud even going anywhere near the Black Materia? Just stop him. Just leave him at home. Say, no, stay on the high wind, or just fuck off for an hour or two. We'll handle this ourselves. And then at the same time, then just Kate Sith, just remove his transmitter so that Shinra can't follow it. You could just really just fuck the entire story up if they wanted to, but they're not going to. They're going to follow the same kind of plot points of the original, but then just be able to throw in random twists. And I do like what that opens up. But when I went out to the Shinra office and I saw that President Shinra was alive and hanging off a building, I was like, what the hell's going on here? And obviously it ends up the same way with a sword through him, just like it does in the original, although you actually get to be able to see it this time. And I liked that. I thought, oh, this is different. This is nice. This is a good way to be able to get around our expectation. And then when Bareth got stabbed up and he got murked, I was jaw on the floor. Couldn't believe it. And I was thinking, oh my god, that's such a brave choice. I can't believe they've done this. They killed Barrett off. And then plot ghost, he's back alive again. Which, okay, cool. It's nice to have Barrett back. He's the boy. But plot ghosts, man. Not about that. Not about that. So yeah, sorry this part was just a bit more of a rant than anything else. And I'm probably going to do very minimal edits to this because that's my thoughts at the moment. As I said in my Resident Evil 3 Remake review, if you want it done exactly the same as the original, then you're looking for a remaster, not a remake. So I'm all for changes. I'm all for them trying to flex their creative muscle, exceed our expectations that we don't already have, and try and kind of subvert our expectations to what's going to happen. And I like that, and I'm all down for that. But I just really feel when it descended into Kingdom Hearts territory is never good for me. Never good. And it does raise questions that I have for part 2 that I never thought I'd be asking. But at the same time, I'm excited to see where they go from here. This game overall is a big success in my opinion, even though I'm not a fan of what happened with the ending and the ending boss fight, and I feel like it could have been handled differently. It doesn't sour the experience that I had with the game. The Final Fantasy VII story, the Midgar section is the weakest part of the game, so for it to be as enjoyable as it was is a testament to how good the game actually is. But that's enough rambling. Thank you very much for listening to this discussion. It doesn't have to be a one-way discussion. Please don't shout at your monitor, I won't be able to hear it. I'm not superhuman just yet. But you can comment below. You can have a nice little discourse then about what the game succeeded with, what its struggles were, and kind of just talk about our thoughts. I really enjoyed listening to the audience and kind of hearing what you guys say, so I would appreciate that. If you enjoyed the video, please put a like on it. Remember to sub to the channel. It all helps, and as soon as we hit 100, a compilation of all the skits is going to go live, so I'm really looking forward to releasing that to everybody. So let's see if we can get there. Alright guys, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, see ya.